WCIA-3 Plus with Taylor Mitchell. This is Chat with the Chief.
Well, as a daughter of a law enforcement officer, I know how important it is to build that gap between the community and law enforcement officials. So I am launching a new segment trying to get to know our leaders a little bit better. Today, I am joined by Champaign County Sheriff Dustin Heuerman. Thank you so much for being here.
Morning, Taylor. Thank you for having me here.
Absolutely. You're our guinea pig. You're our first one. So it's exciting that you get to be a part of it.
I'm looking forward to it for sure.
Absolutely. Okay, so I just want to kind of start by talking about your background in law enforcement and why you decided to run for sheriff.
Sure. So I grew up in rural Effingham County, and so growing up, I saw my grandfather as a police officer for Effingham Police Department. I actually think he was. I don't think he was a full-time police officer because he was a businessman in the county too, but I think he was an auxiliary police officer. And so I grew up seeing him in parades and at different community functions, and I really think deep down, that's what convinced me to be involved in law enforcement. I graduated high school. I went to community college because that was what was expected of me. I'm a first-generation student. Neither of my parents had gone to college. And so I was working at the local IGA at the time, and I couldn't decide, do I want to major in business administration or do I want to major in criminal justice? And at the time, there were lots and lots of people wanting to be police officers. It's not like it was today. You may go to a testing and there's 300 people testing for maybe 3 positions. Wow. And so I started off with the business route, and then I shifted to criminal justice because that's really where my passion is. And that kind of led me then to get my bachelor's degree in criminology, which led to my master's degree in criminology. I started at 21 years old, which is the minimum age that you can be a police officer in Illinois. I started at 21 in this little village named Cowden. It's just south of Shelbyville. And then I moved to Douglas County Sheriff's Office, where I worked narcotics. And it was a state police task force that I was assigned to. And then I eventually made my way to the Champaign County Sheriff's Office as a deputy. And so after I was a deputy for a few years, the administration at the time, not necessarily the sheriff, because I didn't have a lot of interaction with the sheriff whenever I was a deputy, but at the time, there were things that I didn't necessarily like at the sheriff's office, which is why I decided to move on. It's also part of the reason why in the future I decided to actually run for sheriff. And so, my training and education has all been something that wasn't necessarily pre-planned from when I was, graduating high school. It's something that just kind of naturally happened. And so whenever the current sheriff whenever the sheriff at the time decided that he was going to retire, I thought, well, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring because I have some pretty good ideas. I wanted to put a focus on education for deputies. I think that higher education makes somebody a better communicator, which then decreases uses of force and things like that. And so I had some priorities that my perception is the administration did not have at the time. Now, I don't know if they did or not. Again, there's a lot of levels at the sheriff's office, but my perception was that there were some things being focused on that I wanted to go a different direction, which is why I decided to run. Surprising to me, and I'm pretty sure everybody else in the community, that I won sheriff in 2018, and then I won re-election a couple of years ago. And so I've really had, at this point, I would say at 6.5 years, I've had the opportunity to really get fulfilled by the job. It's taken me 6 years to get used to this job. It really has, because every day is something different in this role. And the community is a dynamic community. You have one person yelling one thing, and then in the other ear you have somebody else yelling the exact opposite thing. And as sheriff, I then have to take all of those dynamics and I have to do what's best for Champaign County. And that may seem easy, but it's really not the easiest thing to do. And it's a acquired skill. So what I mean by that is I have finally started feeling comfortable saying, your opinion is very important. Let's see how we can work that into how we're going to do things. But not making a knee-jerk reaction based on what may be going on in the community, not making a knee-jerk reaction on the loudest voice or voices in the community. That, I think, are some of the things that people don't think of when they think of the role as an elected sheriff, is balancing all of those things, because those voices are going to calm down. And then they're going to say, well, why did you make that decision? And you can't make those knee-jerk reactions, because then you're going to have to pay the consequences for that in the future.
For sure. Absolutely. So you were elected in 2018. Tell me about some of the changes that you have made. I know you kind of went over it a little bit. I know that education is very important, but talk about how you've seen the sheriff's office change over the years.
So some of the major things we've seen over the last few years is we have recently moved into a new sheriff's office. So we started that. That was really cool, because in 2019, 2020, we started talking. We had a lot of aspirations before COVID, and then COVID hit, and it kind of stopped the world, right? Mm-hmm. And so we saw a dilapidated sheriff's office, and we started the conversation. I started the conversation with the county executive, Darlene Clopel, at the time, to then relocate the sheriff's office. And that kind of molded into relocating the majority of county offices. The old County Plaza building, the new Bennett Administrative Center, right across from the courthouse still in Urbana. But that has provided us the opportunity to really, when we're talking about 21st century policing, the old building was in 1980. And so being involved in this has had the opportunity to kind of make sure that space makes sense for a 21st century police department. It has allowed us to include technology in our interview rooms and interrogation rooms that help us to solve cases better. We've been able to invest in body cameras and in-car cameras and different types of technology that is expected of a 21st century police department that really helps us be more efficient and professional in policing. So those are some of the things from the law enforcement side. Of course, the correction side is something that a lot of people don't want to think about, but it is a duty of the sheriff. Is technically, through statute, I'm warden of the county jail. And so I closed the downtown facility, the downtown jail facility, in 2021, because we were seeing a lot of violence, and it was not conducive to really a safe and professional environment for corrections. And so then we housed out of county, which cost a lot of money, but we also invested in our infrastructure here, and now we have a consolidated facility. All of our inmates are back in the county, and it provides the resources that we need, for an example, with mental health. So I wish that we didn't have anybody with mental illness in custody. We are not a mental health facility. Unfortunately, people with mental illness are arrested, and at least temporarily, we have to provide the best care for them that we can. And so this allows us, if somebody is threatening suicide or somebody is mentally ill, our consolidated facility allows us to better keep an eye on them, better address what needs they have at the time, and that equals a safer environment for them and a safer environment for my correctional officers. And so when you think about the last 6 years, there has been probably $40 million invested in the sheriff's office and infrastructure that has really helped us do a better job. And why is that important to Champaign County taxpayers? You may think $40 million is a lot of money. Yes, it is. But all it takes is one lawsuit in the jail to have to pay $40 million to somebody because we didn't have the adequate infrastructure we needed. Or $40 million lawsuit when my deputies make an action and it's a he said, she said situation. Our body cameras pick up if a deputy messes up, we own that. And we will investigate that to the best of our ability, and we will address that. But more often than not, we get complaints on deputies or correctional officers that are unfounded. And how do we know that? Because we have body cameras, we have video, we have the entire story that then we can investigate and then get to the bottom of what actually happened. And so all of those things are things that we have advanced the sheriff's office over the last 6 years.
That's incredible. And I used to investigate the Department of Corrections in Oklahoma, and I know that 85% of our inmates get released back to the public. So that's why it is important to invest in getting them help, especially throughout their time in jail. So
it is. And unfortunately, we have a lot of recidivism, a lot of repeat offenders. And one thing that's interesting to me, because I did not have a background in corrections when I took over as sheriff, and so the corrections thing was completely new.
It's different.
Yes. And so one thing that's surprising to me is Some people don't even know they have mental illness until they get into the jail. Then we give them the treatment they need, and they start making rational decisions, and they're like, wow, I never thought that I had an issue until it was solved. But then the problem is my opinion is that community resources really aren't where they should be as far as substance abuse and mental illness and things. And so unfortunately, somebody will get released from custody, and then a couple of months and they're back in custody because they haven't been able, they either don't seek the help they need or they weren't able to get the help they need out in the community. And so that's something that I'm working with, Community Coalition and Public Health and some of the community healthcare organizations. That's where I think we really have an opportunity to improve our community, and that will lead to fewer people incarcerated for things like mental illness.
For sure, absolutely. Switching gears, talk to me a little bit about some of the conversations residents have with you about some top concerns in the county.
I would say the number one concern that has been voiced generally in the county over the last few years is gun violence. And so people want to go out and they want to be safe. And we have kind of seen a shift over the last couple of years of now necessarily you don't have to be the intended target of gun violence to be a victim of gun violence. We've seen some pretty high profile cases of that over the last couple of years. And so that's scary because I have family and friends that live in Champaign County too, and they don't carry firearms with them, right? I do. I have the luxury of carrying a firearm because that's part of my job, but I am worried about them getting hit by a stray bullet. And I think that's part of the motivation of helping to get this under control. And it may seem like that it's still running pretty rampant, but I deal with Chief Boone and Chief Tyler and Chief Ballinger from our local police departments.
Right.
We talk almost on a daily basis on different things that we can all do to help get this situation under control. And we have helped mitigate the situation. The county itself generally has very little gun crime. I think I've had 2 shooting incidents in the last 5 months in county jurisdiction. However, as sheriff, I serve the entire county, and my deputies have jurisdiction in the entire county, which is why it's important to us that we take a proactive role in helping the cities to address the gun violence too. We're all in this together. We all live here in Champaign County. We all work. We all have family that are here in Champaign County. And we have a passion for making this the safest and best community that we can actually make. So I would say that's one of the things is gun violence. The other thing we've been really focused on trying to find a good solution for is domestic violence. So domestic violence is something that has been increasing over the last few years. I think my number one thing that my deputies have arrested people for in 2024 were a domestic altercation. That's also the number one thing that people were arrested for in the jail and then brought in. And so that's why those community relationships really come into play, especially with, let's say, for an example, undocumented community. So people say, Sheriff, why are you so? Immigration is a federal thing, and I would agree. It's a federal issue. We don't have any immigration powers as law enforcement officers in Illinois. We actually can't take any kind of action immigration wise in Champaign County, in Illinois, or we can be in trouble for that legally. But so people say, why is it a really big deal to you? And the reason it's a big deal is because if you are fearful that you may get deported, you're not going to call the police whenever you're a victim of a crime. And we want people to call the police when they're a victim of a crime. Unfortunately, a lot of times in the undocumented communities, they are victims of robberies, they're victims of domestic battery, they're victims of sexual abuse, and they are afraid to come forward because they're afraid that we're going to deport them. That is not the role of law enforcement here in Champaign County, and we have no say in that whatsoever at all. We have no communication with immigration. And that is actually, I was actually participating in a meeting yesterday with the New American Welcome Center, and we were collaborating on different ways that we can build that trust. And that's one of the things that we talked about is how do we make sure that all of our community members know we're there to investigate crime. We're not there to unnecessarily get anybody in trouble. We're not there to deport anybody. We want to make sure that victims of crime are safe and they're reporting crime when it happens, because we can't do our job if we don't know it's occurring.
Absolutely. And kind of going off of that, I know over the weekend around Illinois, I'm not sure if we even saw it here, but, several protests about immigration policies. Do you have any advice for maybe protesters? Maybe there's somebody, I know that there was a protest over in Springfield. Maybe somebody in central Illinois is watching and just wants advice on how they can be respectful with law enforcement during protests, because of course we all know that sometimes those things can get out of hand. I know my dad was just working the protest down in Chicago over the weekend, and so really what would be your advice for protesters with this matter?
So we get a lot of protests at the courthouse, and we had thousands of people there on Saturday, and we had law enforcement present, but they were not seen. And so I think that's a key, is people have a First Amendment right to express their feelings. They have a First Amendment right to assemble. They have a First Amendment right to protest. I think we have a good relationship with people who are organizing protests, reaching out to us beforehand saying, we're going to have this protest.
That's great.
And that allows us to work with them on safety measures. So for an example, we had some people walking out in front of traffic on Saturday, not because they were purposefully walking out in traffic that I'm aware of, but because the protest got so big. And then you have vehicles that are driving and they probably don't even know a protest is happening until they're right there on it. Those are the things that I'm worried about. And that's why it's important to open those lines of communication. We're not going to suppress any kind of communication at all. That's not our job. We constitutionally can't do it. But that also gives you, as a protest organizer, our contact information. And so if things start getting out of hand, in my experience, when protests have gotten out of hand, it's not because those who are organizing it let them get out of hand. It's because other people have come in. And now the protest organizers are trying to get things under control, but it kind of got out of their control, right? And so having a resource at the sheriff's office or on U of I or Champaign or Urbana, whatever jurisdiction that is, and that way you can communicate with them even in real time. If there's something that you just can't control and you need help doing, giving us a call, we'll decide the best way to kind of approach that. But I mean, I am 100% for people expressing their feelings. We don't want it to get violent, because violent protests are not protected under the Constitution. And so peaceful protests are. And so we want to make sure that people are safe. All people are safe, and they're all able to get their views out there in a manner that's not going to end up with law enforcement action. Nobody wants that. My deputies are prepared to act if we need to. We have not seen that in Champaign County since 2020, when we had a riot that sparked off here then. But I'm actually kind of proud of that. I see LA, I see Chicago, I see some of these things. And then you look at a multi-thousand person protest that occurred here in Urbana. Not a single person was arrested as a result of that. And I think that is amazing. That speaks to our community of getting their feelings out, getting their point across, but doing it in a way that's productive and not in a way that's counterproductive by then bringing a negative light on their topic they're wanting to cover.
I love that advice, just to reach out to you and work together, because you support, them expressing their feelings. So I love that. Going off of, I know, your deputies were there. Tell me, what's one thing that you want people to know about your deputies?
So I think it's important to know that my deputies have been asked to do a job by Champaign County. So we have a sheriff's office. We realize deep down, although some people like to argue the point, some people, surprisingly in our community, can be instigators on just kind of what we call stir the pot, right? They throw a little thing out there and they'll see where it goes. There's no doubt there are people out there in our community that want to do that. But I think the important part is that we can't have a civilized society without law enforcement. And we hope that law enforcement is ethical and professional, and they do a good job in our community. And I think our Champaign County law enforcement, not just my deputies, but Champaign County law enforcement itself, does a good job at checking those boxes. You may not always like the outcome that they have. We have to arrest people. We have to write citations. Right. We have to do different things like that. But my job is to have ethical, professional law enforcement officers that are going to make the right decisions out on scene. And talking with the other chiefs frequently, that's what they want in those officers too. If we see an officer that is unprofessional or unethical, we're going to get them out of there. We don't want them serving our community. So I want the community to realize that my police officers, my deputies, my correctional officers live amongst us. We are from here, we have kids, we have pets, we have neighbors. We are asked to do a job from our community, and so we put on a badge and we put on a uniform and we do that job in the name of protecting the community and making it the safest community we can. And so when it may be easy to just look at them as a authoritarian figure, which we are, also look at them as a person and say, yeah, I realize the job you're doing, and I just want to say thank you for the job you're doing to help protect me and my family as much as possible.
Absolutely. I love that. And wrapping things up, kind of what's your overall message to the public and the community, or maybe what's one thing you want them to know?
We are not as strong as law enforcement agency without the community's partnership. The majority of things we do are reactive, and we don't want to be reactive. We want to be proactive. And so the more bridges we build with the community, the stronger we are as a community. And that means the more professional and the more effective we can be as a law enforcement agency. And so I would encourage the community to, when we have events like Coffee with a Cop and things like that may seem simple, but come out and say hi. Get to know us a little bit. We get to know you a little bit. I would like for the majority of our contacts to be because we're driving down the street and we're just waving to each other, we're talking to each other, not because you have a crisis and now we're responding. Right. Because we do that, but I don't want our first contact with the community to be when a crisis is occurring. Right.
I know that's my dad said something the other day that, he was driving around town and kids were waving to him, and he said, that's what I want I want people to know, that we're approachable, and like you said, we're in the community, we're living here, we're playing here, like we want, people to know that we're just humans as well.
It does happen a lot. It's just, unfortunately, the negative incidents seem to take precedent on social media and things, but there is a lot of positive out there.
Right.
And so I just want the community to realize that there is a lot of positive with law enforcement, and the majority of community know that.
Yes, that's so good. Well, thank you so much for being here with us this morning. We appreciate your time, and hopefully people were able to learn a little bit more about you guys.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Well, you can learn more about our producer, Madison. We're still learning here, but we're going to be having another law enforcement official in next week, so you'll want to stay close to WCIA.com for that interview. We also have another version of this interview with Sheriff Dustin Heuerman over on our morning show on WCIA.